everybody. This is Teen Title Talk with Erin.
And Courtney.
This is the podcast
where two librarians review two books every 2 weeks.
Today we'll be talking about the books The Astonishing Color of After by Emily X.R.
and Sadie by Courtney Summers.
But before we do that, we have to get in touch with our teen selves. So we'll answer a couple questions, and then we will talk some books. The jar is closest to me, so I will go ahead and pick our first question.
I feel like we need some music or something.
Something terrifying. All right, the first one is, did you pull any pranks as a teen?
I can't recall a single prank. And I'm not even just saying that to be like, aren't I so...
Good?
Good, right, with a capital G. I think I was just too scared.
What about senior pranks? Did they do one?
Oh my gosh. Our senior prank was actually, now that you mention it.
Oh no.
Flooding back. Our senior prank was horrible. And this will, if anyone does any research.
Oh gosh.
You'll be able to find it.
Was it in the news?
It was in the news.
Oh boy.
Because like 8 kids from my class. So I had a class of like 350 kids.
Okay.
I was not involved in this prank at all. Most people weren't.
Right. There were only 8 kids.
They went to the bus lot like the night before school and they slashed all the tires on the buses.
Oh.
And then they let off the fire extinguishers inside the buses.
I feel like that's vandalism.
That's not a prank. It's vandalism. Yes.
That's kind of...
Yes, you're not wrong.
It's a little over the line.
They, I think, weren't allowed to walk at graduation.
Okay, fair.
And...
did they have to deal with the police at all?
Yeah, I think they had
That's a lot of money. For all those tires?
Yep. It was really bad. Like, I think the idea was like, we won't have school if the buses can't drive.
Couldn't they let the air out or something?
Well, sure, that would have been a lot less
bad.
Mm-hmm. It was not good.
Mm-hmm.
So that was that. Well,
I am glad you weren't involved in that. Actually,
no. So my class was
rough.
one of those. Like, I feel like some classes are like just harder to deal with than others.
Yeah.
I think our class was one of those classes.
Oh my gosh,
we regularly had to have assemblies just about like
just your class
not sucking. Just us.
We're gonna go over this again, everybody.
Yeah, like
try not to be terrible.
You guys have a really bad problem with cheating.
Yeah.
Stop doing that.
Yeah.
We had another one about just like being nice to people because we weren't very good at that either. It wasn't.
It's a rough time.
It was a rough time, but the class before me, so like the 1 year older, they were magnificent. They were all like best friends and all of their prom pictures. There's like 50 people because they all loved each other and they were all really smart and blah, blah, blah. And then the class below me, which happens to be the one that Peter, my husband, is from.
Aww.
They were all really friendly.
Of course they were.
Loved each other. I was like trapped in this horror show. It's fine.
That's amazing. I'm sorry.
But I mean, there was a time. There was like a pranky. It was like senior week maybe time where people were like putting bologna on people's cars and stuff, which I guess peels the paint off.
No, really?
I'm not sure if it's...
Is bologna that toxic?
I don't know.
We're going to test this out.
Yeah, sure. There was something going on and like keying people's cars. It was bad.
Right. That is rough. Ours was not malicious pranks like that. Yeah. We had a prank. I mean, I've done awful things, obviously. We've talked about that. But for our senior prank, we just, our mascot, it's weird to say it as a mascot because it was the Highlander. And usually like people, aren't mascots. But ours was the Highlander, and we decided that the prank would be a huge Highlander holding up his kilt in the front of the school. So I remember like under the cover of darkness, we went to, I think it was Grace Potter's house. And
oh my gosh, of course.
She's a rock star now. And
I know.
Here I am doing this. Our paths kind of parted ways after that, obviously.
Shucks.
And we made this wire man and put a kilt on. And Clint, my friend Clint, he like knew how to make these wire structures, so he was like leading it, and it was just a small group again.
That's
and I think
cool.
I bailed out like halfway through the night because
Was this Highlander anatomically correct?
I have no idea. I have zero.
Because I feel like
recollection.
that's the fun.
You know what I think? He might have been wearing underwear. I'm not even sure.
Oh my gosh, what a clean. That's good clean fun.
I know. I don't know. I have to really dig through. I can't recognize it in my mind being anything that was that out of control. But it was funny. It was just funny.
Just cute.
Yeah. So that was it. All right. Let me pull the next one just because we're sitting here and it's in front of me.
That's fine. I'll try not to talk too much this time.
I love it when you talk. What was your fashion like? And in this, fashion is in quotation marks, probably because it came from a coworker and they know us.
Yeah, considering what my current fashion looks like, it can't be too good.
It's pretty bad.
Oh my gosh.
Mine too.
Well, I'll give you a couple of outfits.
Okay, let's
How's
hear.
that?
Yes.
So I went to an 8th grade dance when I was like, whatever.
In 8th grade.
In 8th grade.
Yeah.
13 years old, maybe 14. And I was wearing brown corduroy overalls
I love it.
with felt clogs.
Well, yeah. This is exactly what I would be wearing.
And like could have been a bodysuit underneath, like a long sleeve, like thermal bodysuit.
Mm-hmm.
Now, maybe I would be like ironically cool wearing it.
I see.
Then
not so much.
It wasn't really the time.
For overalls? Are you sure? Because I was wearing overalls as well.
Were you wearing them to dances?
Probably. I was. Neither of us were.
It wasn't good. It was bad, I would say. Like other people. What was this? What year was like 1998?
Right.
So we're talking. I was like Spice Girls time.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of mini skirts. There were a lot of like platform shoes.
Really? Okay, yeah.
Like at dances.
Yeah, that wasn't on my radar at all.
Oh,
I was with the clogs. It's maybe because we were in rural New England.
Perhaps. I don't know. But it just, I wasn't a fashion icon.
You want to trip on the dirt road with those platforms.
I think I had a problem with overalls because I have the other outfit I was going to mention also has overalls, which I didn't really wear all that often. But
maybe that was your best outfit.
They really stuck in my mind because the other outfit I have in mind is 9th grade. I wore it fairly frequently. Denim overalls with probably sneakers and a like Disney sweatshirt over it.
Yeah.
So that you could see like the buttons.
Sure.
Made lumps. I don't know what was going on.
It sounds like you just wanted to be comfy.
It was
I love
bad,
it.
but I lived for comfort and still do.
And I still do. And
how about you?
I'm with you on this, Courtney. I wore like things that looked like pajamas, which I think sometimes I still do. Like I had several outfits that were just straight up maybe were pajamas. But people were always like, "Wow, I love that outfit." Like, thanks. Yeah. So that was pretty much me. It stood out, I think. People didn't follow anything that I did, but they certainly noticed what was happening. They're like, "Wow, you look really comfy."
Did you have cool hairdos?
No. Okay, you know my hair is curly.
It's beautiful.
Thanks.
In case you've never seen Erin,
okay, but here's
she has
the thing.
magnificent hair.
It took me a million years to figure out how to take care of my hair, and during that time, I brushed it.
Oh, I can imagine
so
now.
it was like straight up, and which happened the other day because I was having like a dreadlock situation in the back. I had to brush my whole head, and it looked like I went back to the 80s. It was awful. My hair was way out. It was like it's out, but it's a triangle shape.
Yep, I got
It's terrifying.
Yeah, I got you.
So now I don't brush my hair. Wash, condition, put it up in a slap, and that's yeah. But
So
it took
it's
me
easier
forever.
than ever.
Yes.
And it looks better than ever.
And it looks better. Yeah. So.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Last one.
Okay.
Let's see. What was your favorite teacher and why? There are some good teachers out there.
I had a lot of good ones.
Did you?
I did.
As a teen or just your whole life?
My whole life, but also, I think specifically as a teenager, I had really good I just had some really nice teachers. I had a couple of bad ones and mostly good ones.
Who stands out?
Well, I really enjoyed my American government class.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Morse.
Mm-hmm. There's always a Mr. or Mrs. Morse as a teacher.
It does seem that way, doesn't it? He was great, really engaging. We watched episodes of The West Wing.
Cool.
He talked to us like
adults.
Mm-hmm. We were really invested, and like,
I love that.
What's his name on the show? Jed.
Oh, yeah.
I believe is the president's name on The West Wing. Uh-huh. We all really wanted to know what was going on there. I think he was young also. When I was in high school, he was like 26, 27.
Okay, gotcha. So he's kind of cool.
He was kind of cool. He was like, had been like a former lobbyist. Something like he did that for a couple of years, and then he decided to start teaching. So, I don't know. He was just cool.
That's awesome.
But my other favorite teacher was, oh gosh, she spelled her name always with lowercase letters, which I thought was like so cool and EE coming
and unique,
of her.
Yeah.
God, what the hell's her name? Mrs. Mountford. She was delightful. Mm-hmm. Teeny tiny little elf woman who, when she read Ode on a Grecian Urn, would like whisper.
Oh yeah, she was into it. The text.
Like, yeah, to like make you listen. And she was like, it's the worst poem, but it's the best poem. And we were like, yeah, tell me more, Mountford, tell me more. And
so cool.
Yeah, she just made everything so awesome. She was an AP English teacher.
That's a cool.
I had her senior year.
Yeah.
She was wonderful.
That sounds awesome.
Mm-hmm. Did you have marvelous people?
I had some. I mean, I was not the world's best student, obviously. And so there were great teachers. I just didn't connect with a lot of them as much as I could have or should have. Miss Stahl was my favorite, and she was an English teacher as well. Mm-hmm. I had her for a couple of years in high school because she taught multiple classes. And creative writing class, my senior year, I believe it was senior year, was my favorite. Mm-hmm. But she was similar to the one you're talking about. And she'd really get into the text, but she was always looking for metaphor. And she was also, though, really intense, and she had high expectations. She was known for having high expectations. Mm-hmm. Like every day we'd have to write a 3-page class response to what we thought about class. And then there was like additional stuff on that.
That helped you later in college.
I was a very good writer in college. So I loved her. I remember being like, we had a little conflict at one point. I remember her just being like, what? Just say what you're trying to say clearly. And then I was I don't know what I'm trying to say, because we were doing like a peer review thing.
Oh my gosh.
And then finally it just clicked that I had to say it more simply.
Oh,
and so there were these like formative moments like that. And she always had a very creative classroom, and it was set up in a circle so we could all talk and put our voices into the space in the middle. And it was just a special space. So I love that class. And and I still see Miss Stahl.
That make you feel like you as a teen, as a student, who really, I mean, in the hierarchy of the world, feel like you often have no agency. It's so wonderful to feel.
To feel like you own
something.
A piece of that.
You can say something.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, so that's great. I love good teachers.
That was a good question.
All right, so let's go on to books. Courtney, you read Sadie. What was it about?
So Sadie is about a teen, sort of an older teen, who lived with her sister and really was the caretaker for her sister. And then her sister turns up murdered. This is not spoiling anything.
Okay, this is like a backstory almost.
Backstory.
Okay.
And so the whole book is really Sadie's journey to try and find out what happened to her sister.
Cool.
Yeah.
That sounds like a great one.
Yeah.
Okay. I read The Astonishing Color of After, and that one was about Lee, a young artist whose mother commits suicide. And again, that happens, prior to the beginning, and then we follow her journey as she travels to her estranged grandparents' house in Taiwan to sort of unravel this family history and deal with the grief and the loss. So it was really interesting as well. Both of these books were kind of being considered, they're both on best lists, and we always think about the best lists this time of year as the Printz awards will be coming up. And I was kind of looking at the Printz website as I was thinking about the questions I wanted to ask you about Sadie and wondering what their criteria was. And one of the things they kept saying was, we want to give the award to a quality book, a great book. Something that people will be talking about, and something that has all those elements of style, like character and setting and, voice. Something that has it all. But that's kind of it. They were a little bit vague. So I'm basing my questions off of those general ideas of what makes a great book.
Sure.
So first of all, with Sadie, what made it a book that hit so many of the best lists? Was it a quality book?
I think... Yes. I can say yes. I think it is a quality book. At least for me.
Right.
Because I guess it's sort of hard to be objective. Right. I've never been on an awards committee.
Right.
So I'm not sure how they maintain objectivity, but...
Right. They're bringing their personal opinions too, I think. Then they're discussing it.
Right. So for me, I think a quality book is one that grapples with hard problems, which doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be like a serious book. I think there's lots of books that are funny or that are lighter or like really entertaining that still deal with hard problems. Actually, the Printz
and the dressmaker
website thing.
Oh, the Printz.
No, the Printz.
I was like, are you
the Printz Award website thing mentions like Holes as a book that hits all of these things. And Holes is like, it's dealing with hard stuff, but it's also like fun.
Exactly.
So
it pulls you along.
Yeah. So I think definitely hard problems. And then I think the other thing is that it has to be really readable. Like, you don't want to put it down. And then I think the last thing is that it's fair to the reader. And what I mean by that is a book that doesn't introduce like random people like 3/4 of the way through the book or have all these like loose ends that just like not only never get woven together, but like just seem like they never go anywhere. And it's not that there aren't that many books that get published that are like that, but
they do, like, it does happen though, where something's not fully visualized or fully edited.
Wait, where was that going? Or I thought that, why was that whole chapter even in there? So like things like that I find really bothersome. So I think Sadie hits the target on all of those.
Okay, cool. That's great.
So that's what I can say.
Right, so let's talk about character, because character is one of those essential parts of any story for me. And this one sounds like it's got an intense plot. You're following this mystery.
Yes.
And she's trying to solve it. How were the characters? Were they deep, human, interesting?
Yeah. Okay. So I would say they're very, very human. Especially because they're all, most of them are very multifaceted.
Okay.
There are a couple of characters that are, I would say, straight up villains. But that could be because we already know something about them that other people don't know. And so to other people, maybe they don't seem like villains like in the story world. But it's obvious to the reader that they're really bad people.
Okay.
And those are the ones she's going after.
Right. And that sounds like it makes it interesting.
Yes.
Right.
But lots of the other characters that kind of come and go out of Sadie's journey are forces for good, but also sort of they're self-interested, like just like real people.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think they're really well done. And there were a few people where you're like, oh gosh, I feel like I know that person, or oh yeah, that makes total sense. Because there's some people that like sort of leave Sadie to her own devices at some points, and you're like, why? She's trying to do this cool thing.
Right.
Avenge her sister's death, basically.
Right.
But when people don't want to help her, you're like, well, why not? But there's like the self-preservation aspect to all people.
Oh, yeah.
And they're like, well, we don't really want to get mixed up in that. So, no.
They're great. Cool. Okay. How about style and voice? Did it jump at you as being unique? Did it feel new or fresh, or at least well captured?
So one thing I haven't touched on yet, but is really important to the book, is that it has this podcasting element. Which... Nice. Yes. So it's half told by Sadie, or it's half Sadie's story, I guess I should say, and half a podcaster's story.
Oh,
and he's doing like a true crime podcast about Sadie being missing.
Whoa.
Yes. So he is following her footsteps using investigative reporting. So all of Sadie's action is happening like 2 or 3 months in the future of when the podcaster guy is going, and they're like switch off chapters.
That's cool.
So you know more than he does, but you don't know everything.
Right.
And it is kind of cool. It bothered me at first.
Okay.
Where I felt like it was a little bit of a gimmick, like a style gimmick. But then the more I thought about it, the more I was like, this is sort of where we are, though, right now. Where, like, some of the best reporting and investigating is happening just by, like, podcast folk.
Right.
And people are listening more and more.
Oh, yeah.
Ever.
And if you're tying pieces together as you're reading a podcast, that sounds like it might be interesting element to the story, because you're figuring things out either before or in conjunction or after the main narrative.
Yes. And I think it also brings in an important discussion of like who gets to tell whose story.
Yeah. And how it differs from those different points of view.
Yes.
Cool.
So after I thought about it that way, I was like, no, I like it. It's kind of cool.
Cool.
Yeah.
How about anything that bothered you? Because we're talking about like something that would take the Printz. There's not going to be a lot that would bother you. Was there anything that you really didn't like about the book?
At first, the podcast thing actually was annoying to me, but
right.
I sort of grew to appreciate it.
Okay.
But
so you ended in a different place.
Like, I can't think of anything that I really didn't like.
It sounds like it's a contender. All right. Do you think it would take the Printz? I mean, compared to like other books you read this year, you've read quite a few YA books, I think.
I have. So, like another book that the list that we were using suspected might make it to the nomination stage was Children of Blood and Bone.
Oh yeah,
which I read.
Right.
Also, I mean, obviously the two books are totally different.
Yeah.
But and that one's going to be a movie. Like, it's got all kinds of things happening. It's going to be the first of a series. So, like, there's a lot of differences. I haven't read all the other books, so I can't, it's hard to say.
Well, you read The Poet X, and I think that one's up there, too.
I think this one, it deals very heavily with sexual abuse, with domestic violence, with drug use, and just sort of kids really being left to their own devices.
Okay.
And I think that's definitely a story worth telling. It feels really authentic. It has a really cool heroine. I don't know, though, if it would win.
Okay. Well, we're going to find out.
It has a lot of good stuff going for it, though, so it's definitely good.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Sadie by Courtney Summers. Well, I'll have to read that one.
Yeah, it's a quick read because you just can't stop reading it. It's a thriller, so
that sounds great.
That's right. All right, so the YALSA, did you say YALSA? Or,
yeah, YALSA, I say.
Section of the American Library Association, that's who puts out the Printz Awards.
Right.
Says that popularity is not a criterion, that message is not a criterion, and being controversial is not a criterion. And all they really say is, we want a book that readers will talk about.
Okay.
Can you say a little bit about why The Astonishing Color of After is a book that readers would talk about?
I think, okay, well, first of all, and maybe this is the most important thing, it deals realistically with suicide, depression, and the family relationship to all of this when someone commits suicide. I think that's really relevant in this day and age, and I think it's well done in the book. I also noticed that it's got this really interesting multicultural bent and this look at family history that you just don't see in a lot of other books. It's very thorough and deep in that way, and I think that also makes it worth talking about. And I also think that there's this magical realism element that's caught me by surprise, that I thought was really fascinating. One thing I didn't talk about in the description of the book is that when her mother dies and she is in Taiwan, her mother appears to her as this red bird. And so then she wants to get that red bird, and she kind of follows this as she's following the grief and the aftermath of the suicide. So all of these things are interwoven to make it really unique and yet relevant and yet magical. So I think those are all things worth talking about.
Cool.
Which is probably why it's hitting a bunch of good lists.
Yes. Awesome. It sounds really good and different.
It is.
So we get a lot of best of lists at this time of year and award nominations and whatnot. And I'm curious what you think the role of literary awards or accolades has on whether you would even choose a certain book or not choose a certain book. Like if it has won an award or is nominated for an award or shows up on like the 15 books you have to read. Sure. Are you like, oh, I got to read that?
Yeah.
Or you're just like, eh.
All right. Well, basically, here's what I think. When those book lists come out, they're coming to us, right? They're coming to the professionals who deal with books. They're coming to booksellers. They're coming to librarians. They're going to book bloggers. They're going to booksellers. All of these people and parents might notice them. Teens are not picking up on these as much. They're just not. They don't care about the book lists. Whatever their friends reading might be interesting to them. But it is hugely impactful because teens are dependents, and often they get their reading recommendations through different channels that come from often professionals in the book industry. So, they'll come to the library looking for a book, or they'll go to a bookstore looking for a book, and they're like, "Hey, this is on the list for et cetera, et cetera." If they're browsing at the library, if they're a library browser, this might not impact them at all. But I think this impacts sales hugely, and it would make an author's career because being on the list would be great. And it's because of all the book influencers, I'll say, like us. So yeah, it does impact their reading just because we're the professionals saying, hey, read this.
That's true. It probably also affects how many books they decide to print.
Exactly.
Which is interesting.
Or reprint, when they go into reprints, yeah.
Did you find The Astonishing Color of After to be more compelling than other books you've read this year?
Okay. I enjoyed it very much, and it was intense. And I think it's very well done, and her writing is great. However, and it's so hard because it's like, this is such a good book. But there were things that, to me, there were books I liked better this year. Home After Dark by David Small. It's a graphic novel, but I love that one. But The Poet X. There's so many good books this year. Mary's Monster, The Parker Inheritance. I just had a great list. So I wouldn't put it above a lot of the books I read. There was one thing that kept bugging me, and I think for a lot of people it's what would give the character depth. The character was an artist, And she kept seeing things in color. So oftentimes it would say like he had heavy footsteps that were cerulean blue, or I don't know even how you say that.
I think you said it right.
I think every time that happened for me as a reader, it took me out instead of pushing me closer into the character. I kept saying, what? Wait, okay, well, first of all, yes, she's an artist, but artists see things in so many different ways. They're going to notice the balance of the light. They're going to notice the curve or the line of people's shoulders. You know, as they're kind of translating whatever into their art, it's not necessarily by color. And then it also seemed to happen at the beginning more. And then we get into the middle and we're seeing that kind of metaphor less. So for me, that instead of bringing me closer to the character and making me feel like the character had depth, it made me feel like that was something the author was using to try to create character depth. And because of that,
it's like you noticed it.
Right. And sometimes I like writing that feels more transparent. And so I think because of that, that's what would have knocked it back down the list for me. But that's all.
That's a fair assessment.
I mean, that's small. But it kept jogging me when it happened. And I think for some people it would have been drawing them in. So it might depend on the reader. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah. So much of it does.
It really does.
Would you include it on your best of list? Like if I was like, what was your top 15 books of the year?
Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe at like 15.
Yeah, I'll let you leave it at maybe.
I've read a lot of good books this year.
I know. Well, it was a good year. Well, in some ways.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about like your favorite style element or your favorite element of the book? So like style or voice or character.
My favorite thing was definitely the magical realism part. There was this part called, I think it was often titled Smoke and Memories, where she'd go in, she'd light some incense, and then she'd just dissolve into this memory. It could be anybody's memory. It was this magical component that was really cool. And I just caught me off guard. It was often really ethereal and interesting. It told you about the family history, which was really unique as she was kind of digging it up. So that was my favorite part for sure. Every time I got to that point, I was like, yeah, this is great.
That's cool.
Yeah. It was
fun.
Cool. Yeah, there were a lot of great parts about this book. I definitely still recommend it big time.
Can you speak a little bit to the weighty issues involved with the theme? So, like, the character's mom commits suicide. Even though, like, the awards committee says that message and controversy are not specific criteria. I mean, Sadie is really weighty.
Right.
Astonishing Color of After is really weighty. I mean, a lot of the books are
weighty.
Do you think hard topics tend to do better?
I think that people expect hard topics to do better. So I think, they end up on the best list and we're saying, oh, they're going to do so well this year. But the Printz Award, if you look at the winners, it's not always the weighty books that win. Sometimes it's the post-apocalyptic books, or the there was like a Nick Lake book that was a post-apocalyptic winner a couple years ago. And sometimes they're fantasy, and sometimes they're serious contemporary novels. So I think for sure people are like, oh, this one's serious and literary. But you know what? It could be an adventure that's just well written, that's out there, and the award committee checks it out, and they just love it, and it's solid, and they think it's wonderful. Adventure. I know, me too. So I'd be interested to see what wins.
I am so curious.
Me too.
Do you know when?
I think it's January, because it'll be at the Youth Media Awards.
Awesome.
And you can live stream it when it happens. I'll get a date as we get closer.
Oh, maybe we can post it up on our website.
For sure. So that is Sadie and Astonishing Color of After. That's great.
Cool.
So everybody who's listening, Courtney is going to be taking a short sabbatical soon to welcome her new baby.
Yes, waiting
patiently.
Impatiently.
Any moment now. So next time I'm going to have my coworker Liz here, and she really loves graphic novels and nonfiction, as you know, Courtney.
Yes.
And so we're going to go with some nonfiction, because there's also a YALSA award for nonfiction. She'll be reading Don't Call Me Crazy. No, I'll be reading Don't Call Me Crazy by Kelly Jensen, and that's an anthology. And then she'll be reading My Family Divided by Diane Guerrero.
Cool. I can't wait to hear it.
I look forward to it. So if you get a chance, listeners, to answer our 3 questions, we love to hear from you. The questions today were, did you pull any pranks? If so, what were they?
And how about you in fashion? What were you wearing, or what are you wearing if you're a teen?
And who was your favorite teacher? There are a lot of good ones out there. What made them special? Or if you have a favorite teacher today, what makes that teacher special? Likewise, if you have any questions about reading recommendations or library life, please write to us at teentitletalk@gmail.com, and we'll read a few of our listener responses next time.
Thanks for joining us for Teen Title Talk. The podcast is brought to you by the Derry Public Library and DCAM, Derry Community Access Media.
Until next time.
Bye.
Bye.